Good afternoon, everyone. I'm GT Hill. I got some feedback about my slides yesterday in my 10 talk, so I changed them for you a lot, the opposite. So, I'm hearing your feedback and we're fixing it. So this is a quote that came out of an article that actually inspired what I'm talking about today. So take a moment to read it. Here's the highlights. 68,000 fans simultaneously connected as fast as they want, upload and download. The first time I read this, by the way, I heard Chuck's presentation yesterday. I didn't know it was Aruba at the time. This was actually early last year, this article. And I called BS pretty quickly. I was like, no way. Can it be done? But my first reaction was, how would you do it? If you wanted a stadium to actually be able to connect that many people at single stream, full single stream speeds, how would you get it done? So I started thinking about, to do that, what would you do? And so I thought about this idea for architecting for RF. And the idea is not designing a Wi-Fi system for high density. That is obviously a part that we've talked about, we'll continue to talk about with Andrew's session. But what if you could design the building too? What if you could talk to an architect and say, here are some things that you should consider when you're designing this building? And this is not just for Wi-Fi, in my opinion. This is also, I think, for cellular as well. But any RF communication, if you could design the building to accommodate that, or to be better for it, what could you accomplish? What could you do better? And then after Chuck's session, you know, they did some things, Aruba did some things with that stadium that are on my list. So I can't prove that I didn't steal them outright. But the first one, and the most obvious to me, is client and access point isolation. Now, I don't mean client isolation like the feature set. I mean the idea behind any high-density Wi-Fi system is isolating. APs are the first one we always try to do because we, as network people, have more control over that. But you want to isolate pieces, right? You want this access point. If I could pick this access point to serve these 6 people, I could guarantee some pretty good service to these 6 people if I didn't get affected or affect anyone else in the room. If I could put up some RF walls around them, I could do some pretty good stuff there. So that's the number one thing. How do you use a building or help design a building to get client and access point isolation as much as possible? The next is cabling and conduit. And again, from Chuck's presentation, I saw that they were allowed to do that. They actually were able to route AP locations during the building of the construction. And to me, this is a pretty straightforward and simple one. And Chuck, correct me, this is okay I got 6 minutes, it's okay to talk here, but you were given leeway to put more in than you maybe would need in the end, correct? You were asked to put more in. That's great, right? To get that sort of capability from a customer is really good. The next is enclosures. Now, I saw the enclosures, again, pre-thinking before this Aruba presentation, I was thinking, I never have really jived with the idea of an enclosure just bolted down in a stadium. Now, I don't go to a lot of sporting events, but there are people that cause a ruckus. No offense. Right? Hey, did you just see Abby's presentation? It had Aerohive all over it. Come on, I can say ruckus. All right, so people are causing some issues. So I know you guys thought about it and talked about it before you deployed, but it makes me nervous, right? To have some sort of thing that can get beat up and people get upset at the game and beat it up. So enclosures built in, maybe you're embedding that in the concrete. Waveguides. Now this is out there, right? This is, I will completely admit, this is kind of an out there thought. But one of the things I first thought about with this idea of building a building for RF is actually building in, what if the APs weren't underneath the stands? What if they weren't embedded like was done? What if they were even lower and then waveguides were built? Now a waveguide can be very complicated or very simple. If there's just a tube that happens to reflect frequency in a specific way, that's a waveguide or can be a waveguide. So what if those were designed into the building? where the access point wasn't even there. It's just these, again, you guys know how good I am at PowerPoint, so if I had graphics, they would look like this. They would have, you know, these channels that RF could move. Sorry. I'm going to do better next time. No, I'm not talking leaky coax. Again, I'm not saying that's a bad idea. This is much of a discussion to me, and maybe to provoke some thought, because I've never done this, right? But I'm thinking a literal waveguide is a steel tube or a tube that is designed to carry RF, but like a remote antenna without the cable, I guess, would be maybe a weirder way to say it, that the transmitter is still one area, it's just providing an RF conduit from one to the other, I guess is the best way to say it. Yes, sir? Well, that's the other problem, right? So I'm talking the AP side. The question was, how about the upstream side? Well, the idea, you have to have good receive sensitivity. You have to have all this fancy RF stuff as well. Again, the idea of this is not like I'm going to have the next click and say, here's how you do this situation. Here's a great architect for it. Again, my thought behind this is, I think we're getting to the point where we need to start engaging. I actually think there may be business opportunities for this. I already bought rfarchitecture.com. No looking. But I think there's business opportunities for consulting with different companies. Architecture companies, when they build things, and I'm not just talking stadiums actually. Stadiums were the first one, and it's generally agreed that the signal comes from beneath, right? That's the best way to get some sort of isolation. How you do that, we don't know yet. There are multiple options there. But I started thinking about schools, and there's this debate we had on Twitter between some Ruckus people and some Aerohive people, and I'm not saying who's right or wrong, because I truly don't think that. You were Aerohive, but you were believing in me. The question comes up: how many APs do you put in a classroom? Right? Gregor's an objective guy. I like that. I love that. So how many APs go in a classroom? The answer today, I'm not going to try to establish an answer. But when we start thinking about the capacity that is needed down the road, if someone said, I need 3 APs to serve this classroom, I don't care. That's fine. As long as you get isolation between the classrooms, you can do that. Right? The problem is not serving a classroom. It's serving 20, 30, 40 of them and dealing with co-channel and adjacent channel interference, all this junk we have to deal with. So what if you could design the school where this is, again, out there, right? So let's say you have 2 adjoining classrooms. You start today with RF shielding. You build it in. It's in the design. They build the building. The classrooms are isolated. But maybe between the rooms is a place where an AP can go, where it's RF transparent. Today you can put in 1 AP. Tomorrow, next year, that customer has changed. They need 1 AP per classroom. And then down the road, they need 2 or 3. That the actual design, it was thought about in the beginning on where to place access points. So today you can have one serve 2 or 3 classrooms, and maybe tomorrow you're on a 1-to-1 or even greater. But the idea is to think about that today. During this, I did add, during the warehousing session yesterday, I started thinking, where is the best place for an AP in a warehouse? I have an idea, but I don't know. Anybody want to opinionate on that? Where? In the floor. That's exactly what I was thinking yesterday. I actually was talking to Marcus. I said, what do you think if the APs were in the floor? So next time you build a warehouse, run some conduit, pour some concrete. How hard is it to make a little box? How many do you put in? Too many, right? You put in too many because we don't know what's going to happen. And then you build it. That's a perfect spot. You're 3 feet from the thing. No matter what configuration things change, if you put enough in, it's great. So that's my thing. I just think we should start thinking about building buildings for us, right? Because that's, I think, the next step in serving people like we're going to need to. Any more questions? Thoughts? Sorry? Elevators? Ruckus? Am I supposed to say that? Yeah, I think elevators, are somewhat problematic, but the problem with elevators, off topic a bit, is actually roaming, in my opinion. Yeah. It's not covering the elevator, because you can use the umbilical and go right down that, but you got to roam in and then you got to roam out, and as long as everything's cool, then that's not bad. All right, one last, yes sir? That's actually what I was going to say. Not really. No, Andrew said it much better. Well, if you didn't hear what Andrew said, Andrew did say it better than I did. Is Andrew said this is a utility and we need to plan for it in the future, and I think that's a great way to do it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I agree. Well, that's why these people in this room could make a couple extra bucks, because we like to, consulting on such things, doing some education outreach. You're not supposed to say WAP in this room. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All right, I'm over time. I appreciate the conversation, so I'm going to let the next person come up. Thanks.